Okay, ready to dive into a really tough case.
Always.
This one, this one is going to take us into some pretty dark territory
Yeah.
as we explore the murders of Bibaa Henry and Nicole Smallman,
Right.
two sisters killed in London back in June 2020.
2020.
It's a case, it just raises so many questions
Absolutely.
about protecting women, the influence of online extremism, and just the trust we place in those who are supposed to protect us.
And also, unfortunately, I think it reveals some uncomfortable truths about societal biases.
Yeah.
And how those can have an impact on investigations,
Right.
even media coverage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start by setting the scene. It's June 2020.
Yeah.
London's in lockdown because of COVID-19.
Right.
But, they were allowing outdoor gatherings. And Bibaa Henry, a 46-year-old social worker, is planning a birthday picnic in Friant Country Park with her half-sister, Nicole Smallman, a 27-year-old photographer.
And it's important to keep in mind that despite the age gap between the sisters, they were incredibly close.
Oh.
They were really excited about this celebration,
Yeah.
They carefully chose the location, they put up decorations, it was a festive atmosphere.
Sounds like they were really looking forward to a special evening with friends and family.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do we know much about what happened at the picnic itself?
Well, we know that the celebration went pretty late into the evening. Guests kind of gradually left as the night went on. The last text message that anyone received from Nicole was just after 1:00 a.m.
And what did that message say?
It was to her boyfriend, Adam,
Okay,
and she said she was dancing in a field and would be heading home soon.
but she never made it home.
Right.
When did her family and friends start to realize something was wrong?
So Mina, their mother, she tried contacting them the next day but got no answer. As you can imagine, concerns started to grow among family and friends.
Of course.
Adam, Nicole's boyfriend, even used a phone tracking app,
Oh, wow.
but it was no use.
Wow.
So by Saturday evening, the alarm bells were really ringing, and Mina reported her daughters missing to the police.
And this is where things start to get really complicated and, frankly, disturbing, right?
Yeah.
Mina has been very vocal about her belief that the police didn't initially take her concerns seriously.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mina believes that racial bias and the fact that Bibaa lived in public housing, played a role in the police response, or I guess lack thereof.
Yeah.
It's a concern that sadly echoes in many other cases involving missing women of color.
Right.
Often there's this delayed response, a lack of urgency that raises questions about whether societal biases influence how these cases are handled.
That's a really valid concern. Instead of waiting for the police to act, the sisters' loved ones decided to take matters into their own hands.
They did. Adam, his parents, and a friend named Nina, who had been at the picnic, went to Friant Country Park to search for any sign of Bibaa and Nicole.
Okay.
It was during this frantic search that they made a horrifying discovery.
What did they find?
So Nina, who knew the sisters well, spotted a pair of broken designer sunglasses.
Oh, no.
And she immediately recognized them as Bibaa's.
Wow.
The condition they were in suggested that something terrible might have happened.
Yeah, so the hope that they had simply wandered off started to fade.
Tragically, yes. Adam continued searching, calling out the sisters' names.
Oh, my gosh.
He found another pair of sunglasses, then a knife. Then his father called out to him, leading him to a thicket
Oh, my God.
where the bodies of Bibaa and Nicole were hidden.
What a horrific discovery.
Yeah.
The park became a crime scene, and the autopsies revealed the brutality of the attack.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the investigators found?
The autopsy showed that Bibaa had been stabbed 8 times, and Nicole had been devastating 28 times.
Oh, my God.
There were signs of a struggle, of them being dragged to where they were found.
It was a truly brutal and senseless act of violence.
It really was.
Police began piecing together the events leading up to the murders.
Right.
Did they have any leads at that point?
They interviewed witnesses who reported hearing shouting and screams coming from the park that night.
Okay.
They also found discarded picnic items, and on some of them they found something crucial, DNA evidence. This DNA pointed to an unknown male, shifting the focus of the investigation to finding this man. Police put out appeals for information, emphasizing that the suspect was likely injured during the attack, probably on his hand, judging by a bloody glove found at the scene.
But the case didn't immediately garner much media attention, did it?
No, it didn't. And for Bibaa and Nicole's family, that lack of public awareness was another blow.
Right.
They felt like their daughter's story wasn't being taken seriously.
And then while the family is grieving and the investigation seems to be at a standstill, another development emerges.
Right.
A development that will further erode public trust in the police.
Yeah, this is where we see the issue of police misconduct come into play. Two officers, Jamie Lewis and Dennis Jaffer, who were assigned to guard the crime scene, did something unthinkable. They took and shared photos of Bibaa and Nicole's bodies.
Instead of protecting the dignity of these victims, these officers were exploiting their deaths.
It's awful.
Can you tell us more about what they did?
They used dehumanizing language in messages about the sisters, made inappropriate jokes, and shared the photos with people outside of the investigation.
That is it's a complete betrayal of trust.
Yeah.
And adds another layer of pain and anger to this already unimaginable tragedy.
Absolutely.
What happened when this misconduct came to light?
Public outrage understandably exploded.
Right.
The focus shifted from finding the killer to demanding justice for the officer's actions. The family felt devastated and re-traumatized by this horrific breach of trust. It brought to light the systemic problems within the police force and the need for accountability.
So as the fallout from this misconduct unfolds, the murder investigation takes a back seat. But there's a breakthrough on the horizon.
Yes.
A development that will lead the police to the person responsible for Bibaa and Nicole's deaths. We'll delve into that in the next part of our deep dive.
We will.
So we left off with a sense of outrage over the misconduct of those officers and, a lingering question about where the investigation went from there.
Yeah.
So remind us, where did the investigation into Bibaa and Nicole's murders go from there?
Right. Well, thankfully, despite the setback caused by the officer's actions, the investigation did continue.
Okay.
You remember that DNA evidence found on some of the discarded items?
Yeah.
A familial DNA search linked that to a man named Kamal Hussein, who had some prior encounters with law enforcement.
So they were able to narrow down the potential suspects through family connection.
Exactly. And this familial DNA match led them to Kamal's son, Daniel Hussein, who was 18 years old at the time.
So now we have a name and a potential suspect. What happened next? Did they bring him in for questioning?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
But initially, he was evasive, claiming he'd been robbed and refusing to answer many of their questions.
Oh, wow.
However, the police were already building a strong case against him thanks to CCTV footage and some disturbing items found during a search of his mother's house.
What did the CCTV footage show?
It showed Daniel Hussein purchasing a set of knives just 2 days before the murders.
Okay.
And remember that knife found at the crime scene?
Yeah.
Same brand.
Wow. So they literally had him on camera buying the potential murder weapon.
Yes. And that's not all. The footage also showed him buying a balaclava shovels and those distinctive blue latex gloves.
Okay.
Items that either matched evidence at the park or were seen being worn by a suspicious figure in the area around the time of the murders.
So the physical evidence was really stacking up against him.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the motive for this crime was particularly disturbing. Can you tell us more about what the police discovered at his mother's house?
Yeah, so they found a handwritten document in his room titled Agreement.
Agreement.
It was addressed to the mighty king Lucifuge Raphael.
Okay.
A demon mentioned in an ancient occult text.
Hold on. Are we talking about an actual, pact with the devil here?
Essentially, yes.
Wow.
The pact outlined Hussein's promise to sacrifice 6 women every 6 months in exchange for wealth and power.
What?
It even specified that he would only target women.
Oh, my God.
And that he would win the Mega Millions super jackpot.
And this document was signed in blood.
His blood, to be exact.
Oh, gosh.
They also found a letter addressed to another demon, Queen Byleth,
Okay.
where he requested that a girl at his school fall in love with him again in exchange for blood sacrifices and offerings.
So it sounds like he was deeply immersed in this occult world.
It does, yeah.
Is there any indication of how he got involved in all of this?
That's where E.A. Coedding comes in.
Okay.
He was an American occult influencer, someone you may have heard of.
Oh, yeah.
He gained notoriety for promoting violence and hate speech and was eventually banned from most social media platforms.
Yeah, I remember hearing about him. So this Daniel Hussein was a follower of Coedding.
Hussein had been active on Coedding's online forum for a couple of years.
Wow.
He even bragged about learning his first spell from Coedding's teachings, a love spell.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think Coedding's teachings directly influenced Hussein's actions?
Yeah.
I mean, Coedding was just some guy on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Could he really have had that much power over someone?
It's difficult to say for certain, but Coetting's brand of occultism was all about encouraging violence and ritualistic practices. He literally provided instructions on how to write these demonic pacts, including details like signing them in blood and offering sacrifices.
So it's possible that Hussein was taking this online content quite literally and using it as a guide for his actions.
Yeah.
Are there any known connections between co-editing and actual organized groups or movements?
Yes, there are. Co-editing is actually linked to a neo-Nazi satanic group called the Order of Nine Angles, which has been implicated in the radicalization of several young men who committed violent crimes.
This is a chilling example of how online platforms can be used to spread extremist ideologies and potentially incite violence.
Yeah.
It raises a lot of questions about online safety and the responsibility of these platforms to monitor and control this type of content.
Absolutely. And tragically, there were signs that Hussein was heading down a dangerous path.
Oh, really?
A few years prior, he had been flagged to the authorities for accessing extremist content online and was referred to the government's counter-extremism program called PREVENT.
And what happened with that? Did he complete the program?
He did participate,
okay,
but for whatever reason, the authorities didn't deem him a continued threat and discharged him from the program.
It seems there were missed opportunities to intervene and potentially prevent this tragedy.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complexity of dealing with online extremism and radicalization.
It's a complex issue with no easy solutions. But let's get back to the investigation. Once the police identified Daniel Hussein as their prime suspect, they moved quickly to apprehend him.
Really?
They found him at his mother's house, and when they arrested him, they noticed something quite significant.
They noticed he had injuries on his hand, right?
Yeah, that's right. He had a deep cut on his middle finger that had been stitched up, consistent with the police theory that the killer had injured himself during the struggle with Nicole.
So in addition to the DNA, the CCTV footage, and the demonic pact, they now had physical evidence on his own body linking him to the crime.
Exactly.
It seems like the prosecution had a very strong case against him.
They did. But despite the overwhelming evidence, Hussein maintained his innocence throughout the trial. He claimed that the person in the CCTV footage wasn't him, said his bank card had been stolen, and even tried to claim that the demonic pact wasn't his.
Even though it had his fingerprints and blood on it.
Yes, even then. And his behavior in court was described as disrespectful and disturbing. He would stare at the victim's mother, make offensive gestures, and even turn his back to the judge.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It sounds like he was completely unrepentant.
Yeah.
How did the jury ultimately decide?
After a month-long trial, they found Daniel Hussein guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of possession of a knife. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 35 years.
Wow.
We'll discuss the aftermath of the trial and explore the broader implications of this case in the final part of our deep dive.
So the jury found Daniel Hussein guilty.
Right.
What happened at the sentencing? Did the judge have anything to say about his behavior throughout the trial?
Yeah, she did. She actually called his crimes evil and really emphasized the impact they had on the victims' families and the wider community.
Right.
She didn't hold back in her condemnation of his actions and his lack of remorse.
Given the severity of the crimes and his disturbing behavior, what sentence did he receive?
So he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 35 years. Because he was under 21 at the time of the murders, he couldn't be given a whole life order.
35 years is a significant sentence. But it does make you wonder, given his stated intention to harm more women, if it's enough to truly account for the gravity of what he did and what he might have been capable of.
It's a question that continues to haunt the victim's family and the community.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was caught, thanks to the DNA evidence and the dedication of the detectives, at least prevented further tragedies.
Yeah. We also need to address the actions of those officers, Lewis and Jaffer. What consequences did they face for taking and sharing those photos with Bibaa and Nicole?
Both officers pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office. Lewis was immediately dismissed from the force, while Jaffer, who had already resigned, awaited sentencing alongside Lewis.
And what was the outcome of that?
They both received sentences of 2 years and 9 months.
2 years and 9 months? It does feel inadequate considering the gravity of their actions, the violation of the victim's dignity, and the erosion of public trust. I mean, their actions weren't just a breach of protocol. They were a deeply disturbing abuse of power.
I think a lot of people share that sentiment.
Yeah.
And it shines a light on the larger issues of police culture and accountability issues that unfortunately became even more prominent in the wake of Sarah Everard's murder just a few months later.
That's right. That case involving another young woman tragically killed in London really shook the public's face in the Metropolitan Police.
They did.
And for Mina Smallman, Bibaa, and Nicole's mother, it must have been like reliving her own nightmare.
Absolutely. Mina has actually spoken out about the disparity she sees in how these cases were handled and portrayed in the media.
Right.
She believes that race and class played a role in the delayed response to her daughter's disappearance and the relative lack of public outcry compared to Sarah Everard's case.
It's a painful reminder that societal biases can influence how victims are treated and how their stories are perceived.
Yes, it is. And while the Metropolitan Police have issued apologies and pledged to implement reforms, skepticism remains, especially within communities that have historically faced discrimination and injustice.
So where does that leave us? We have a killer behind bars, officers punished for their misconduct, and a police force under intense scrutiny and pressure to change. But the impact of this tragedy continues to reverberate.
It does. For Bibaa and Nicole's family, the pain of their loss will never truly go away.
Of course not.
But they have found strength in their faith and their love for each other and in their determination to honor their daughter's memory.
And they've channeled their grief into powerful advocacy, calling for greater police accountability and demanding justice for all victims, regardless of their background.
Exactly. Their voices have joined a growing chorus demanding a safer world for women, one free from violence and discrimination.
This deep dive has been incredibly informative, but also profoundly disturbing. What can we as individuals take away from this case? What can we do to help prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future?
That's a complex question, but I think it starts with awareness. We need to be aware of the insidious nature of online extremism and how it can prey on vulnerable individuals. We need to hold those in positions of power accountable for their actions, demand transparency and reform within institutions like the police force, and challenge societal biases that contribute to disparities in how cases are handled and how victims are treated.
It's a call to action for all of us to be more vigilant, to speak out against injustice, and to work towards a more equitable and just society.
And perhaps most importantly, to remember Bibaa and Nicole not just as victims, but as the vibrant, loving, and inspiring women they were. Their lives were tragically cut short. But their story serves as a powerful reminder of the urgent need for change.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to reflect on everything we've discussed today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a case that has left an indelible mark on London and beyond.